Ken Marshall. Today, we're going to be talking about the Four Freedoms Monument and the surrounding parts of it in Evansville, Indiana. And a lot of this came about the inspiration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt in his State of the Union address in 1941. It's January 26th of 1941. And what he was doing and was attempting to do was to present the reasons for American involvement and continuing to get involved in a greater involvement with Great Britain and producing war materials and lending them through them. If we remember from our history class, the Lend-Lease program was getting bigger and bigger as we needed to help Britain. Many of the people in America were not real excited about going into another war, being as that we just finished one in 1917, 1918. Roosevelt's hope was to provide a rationale as to why the United States need to abandon its isolationist policies after it emerged from World War I and add economic support to our allies, which was going to begin in World War II. Now, this speech that he gave, we will see a little bit of that, was on January the 6th, 1941. Again, it was the State of the Union address.
I address you, the members of this new Congress, at a moment unprecedented in the history of the Union. I use the word unprecedented because at no previous time has American security been as seriously threatened from without as it is today.
And it was not but 11 months later, on December 7th, 1941, that we were dragged into this all the way through due to the attack by Japan. The statue that we are looking at now was created by a fellow named Walter Russell later in 1941, and it was dedicated in 1943 before a crowd of 60,000 people in Madison Square Garden in New York City. It was dedicated a year later and moved to Madison, Florida, because it was dedicated in the name of a fellow by the name of Colin. Okay, so in that, the Four Freedoms, as we would have heard if we would have listened to all of FDR's speech, is he identified four freedoms that are universal for everyone, he believed, as he presented, and that is the freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. Now, as we see later on, we see the evidence of the beginning in earlier than 1975, but from the Evansville Press in 1945, where some people came up with a great idea, and that is to take four columns that were a part of an older building, to take them and put them up as a part of the monument. I believe the next slide we will see is the old building, which was a railroad station of an Illinois, central and eastern Illinois, and an old Chicago railroad that used to come through Evansville. Well, as all things change and railroad routes do change, it did as well. And it fell unused after a while. But it was used by the USO during World War II as a USO gathering place for American soldiers. We see here where they decided they needed to tear it down, and they chose to do so. And they were wondering, what are we going to do with these pillars? And the community had long discussions in the 1960s and beyond as to what's to happen across the street and where can they use them and what can they do with them. It was decided by some people they should just knock it down and forget about it. And some people said, no, let's take it down and let's save the pillars and we'll be able to use them later for something else. And some people said, no, what are we going to do with that? And then it was decided, what if we took those pillars down? Would those pillars actually come down off themselves? And they had to discover actually how they were built to begin with, when actually they were of ionic design, as you can see across the top here of the powers themselves. And inspired by FDR in the speech for the Four Freedoms, Norman Rockwell, as we go back, and we'll come back to Evansville in a minute, he created a series of paintings that he spent months perfecting for each of those four masterpieces, which would be published in the freedom of speech, of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. The Saturday Evening Post supported Rockwell's efforts by commissioning four themed essays to accompany the prints, and they published them, and they're well known throughout World War II. The prints were sold. Treasury Department bills were sold, and the Four Freedoms War Bond show commenced. It was an exhibition tour. It dedicated these paintings and the Four Freedom series that still represent some of Norman Rockwell's most compelling works. Here's a thing of Norman Rockwell where he talked about things, and a few things dealing with his dedication to that. And here is one of the paintings themselves, is the Freedom of Speech portrait by Norman Rockwell. Many of us will recognize this one. And the pillar that is now sitting on the riverfront in Evansville is the one for freedom of speech. The next one again is freedom of worship, which we may recognize that as embossing on the front of Saturday Evening Post magazine. Many people have these portraits and pictures hanging in their homes yet. And that is the freedom of religion, that we should be able to worship and do as we wish. As we were thinking about all the things that were going on in Europe at the time, and with the ravages of Hitler's armies and stormtroopers, of what was going on and taking over much or all of Western Europe as best he could. The other was freedom from want. We should be able to put food on our tables and feed our families. That we should not starve. We should have foods available to all of us. And here's Rockwell's painting of that. People drag this one out and show it around Thanksgiving time because it looks like a great Thanksgiving dinner. And then freedom from oppression, where we have, and fear, where we have the ability to have peace of mind and be able to sleep at night and not worry about our families and our families' safety, and from that freedom of fear. Here are the four pillars there. And as you will see around us, when they designed this and they did pull those up, we're going to talk more about how those things appeared soon here. But if you'll notice, the 50 little statues around the side along here, there's one for each state of the Union. And on the flattened portion, as I'm arrowing to right now, is the particular state and the state seal, and then identifying the state on the back and the years that they were brought into the Union itself. It's a beautiful area, and it's right across from the Hadi Shriners area and the McCurdy Hotel, and right on the riverfront in Evansville. Okay. Now, the records, when they go to take this down, if you remember that picture we had a while ago of those being a part of that building, they were trying to figure out, how are we going to do with this? How are we going to take them down? And if we do, what are we going to do with them? Well, the mayor at the time, Frank McDonald, said the basic idea is to use them for like a city county building. And they rebuilt the city county building. There were some other people said, well, no, we need some new steps for the library that we're thinking about putting up, and we need them for that. And then there's other people saying, gee, I don't know. And then there was concern, if you take them down, can you take these things down without destroying the columns themselves? Okay, there was two problems that were considered to be in the path of success. And this is all again from the Evansville newspaper. Taking the columns down, as noticed by a Pat Moore, that the project manager said, how can we take them down without breaking them up? Well, they finally figured that when they were initially assembled, they were drum-shaped sections that were stacked atop one another, and then they were mortared together so you couldn't see the differences of them. So they decided to just find out where those sections were and take the mortar out of them and bring them down. Here's a picture of those sections, or one of those sections of these four. You can see these things were massive. In the background, you can see as they were destroying and taking the building down itself with all that. So a lot went into all of this. And then what happened to it, and this was in the 1960s, they put them behind a building. And as the weeds and grass grew around them in the spring and the summer and in the fall, then they were going on, what are we going to do with them next? Finally, there was a discussion, and here's another picture of the columns coming down. And it was somewhere in the late 60s, early 70s. They came up with the idea of, let's go to this section over here on the riverfront. And that's the McCurdy Hotel right across the street there. And let's test the land and see if it's fine. And we can build a huge monument there using those, using the theme of those four pillars, and have it done by the bicentennial of the United States. This article appeared in the Evansville Press in September of 1975. So they had their work cut out for them literally with all that, okay? So when the monument was almost finished, we see of a young man running across the things here, that this was a wonderful thing, and the economy and the people in the area were starting to get pretty excited about that. And I have an article, I don't know if I have it here or not, it was an editorial stating that people weren't too hot about monuments in Evansville. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. But that was an editorial that someone had in a newspaper. They put in a time capsule in 1979 after the bicentennial, and then it's to be dug up in 2176. And here's another picture of those, and those Doric fashion columns that just jet into the sky right along the river along with that. And here's the states representing around each and every of it. Now, it's not alone all by itself, but it's the center point of a large area for veterans, as you can see there in the background. Here is a memory and dedicated area for people in working in the Korean War, as you can see there. And there's a soldier carrying a carbine rifle, and they're helping a wounded soldier there. And someone from the community fitly put a nice American flag along with it. And that sits right next to it. And here's another one of that Korean War tribute of all that. And by the way, that is made out of copper, and it's beautiful in the sunlight when you see it. Here's another one from another angle with my camera. What I didn't get a chance to get a good sunlit picture of it at the time. There's also another one, the Persian Gulf and the Desert Shield. It's on the east end and to the front, right near the four columns. And there's the monument restoration. It was dedicated in 1976, but as all things need help every now and then, and needs a little bit of cleaning up. Here's where they did some restoration work, and the people that were involved in that in some 20 years later in 1996. They decided they need to put an area to put a great honor for those people who were wounded in combat, who are from Indiana. And this was erected by the Indiana Military Order of Purple Heart that also is around the area. And that's when our great governor at the time, Joe Kernan, was the governor at the time with all that. And if you recall, Joe Kernan was a great governor for the state of Indiana, also a purple of this member of the Society for the Combat Veterans who received Purple Hearts, and also Governor Kernan was also a POW during the Vietnam War as well. Here's another Korean War tribute that was dedicated, and the sculptor from that from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, with all that. So this is what we have for this. There's lots down there to be seen. There's a beautiful monument to our country and our freedoms that has been put up, that has been saved over the years. Again, here is where the railroad station was. which later became a USO during World War II, and then again was repurposed and used with those columns for a tribute to our country and the wonderful things. I'd like to thank you for your time. And if you have the opportunity, it's very easy to get to. You can go right down the interstate. It's right in the middle of downtown. And fortunately, with the Shriners building, there's a beautiful parking lot right there, right across the street. So you can park there for free and walk over and walk around the whole area with all that. It's right by the riverfront, and there's other monuments there as well. And I thank you for your time.